Hey, everybody. It's a cautious and skeptical day today, but it's also a victory day. It seems the people of Minneapolis, Minnesota have outlasted ICE. They have survived, they have won, they have persevered. It's not 100% certain what's going to happen next, and nobody should believe Donald Trump or anyone in his administration at face value. So when Tom Homan stepped up to the microphone this morning and said that ICE would be leaving Minneapolis, well, that's a big deal. What Homan said exactly is a little bit more vague, but right now the initial reaction is, especially from the local officials in Minneapolis, well, Jacob Fry, the mayor of Minneapolis, is overjoyed, and he said the love of the people of Minneapolis and their standing together has persevered, has outlasted Donald Trump and ICE. And he's right, because no matter how you cut it, ICE is leaving to some degree. The bigger news is we shouldn't believe it till we actually totally see it, but there is precedent here. Trump bailed out of Los Angeles when he didn't get his way. Trump bailed in Chicago when Chicago fought back. And now, and I would argue that politically, it's been more punishing for Trump in Minneapolis than it was in Los Angeles or Chicago. The deaths of Good and Preddy have galvanized the country against these sorts of ICE operations. And Minneapolis has been much more politically damaging for Trump and ICE than the other two operations, which were big blue cities that Trump and his propaganda machine could try to sell as being lawless and out of control. It didn't work in Los Angeles because there were no riots. They used the pretense of a riot. It didn't work in Chicago because officials in Illinois and in the city of Chicago pushed back immediately, and Chicago didn't escalate. Chicago did not give the Trump administration what they wanted, which was more of a reason to send even more troops and to bring in a bigger federal presence than they already had there. What happened in Minneapolis was there was no escalation of violence in Minneapolis either, which showed great restraint, especially after two American citizens were killed by ICE, were shot and killed by ICE. So this is a big day. This is a big day. This is a big sign of the administration once again, when confronted, backing down. And I think it's important to look at exactly what Tom Homan said during part of his press conference. So we're going to play a minute of that right now.
Like I said, and Operation Metro Surge is ending. And in the next week, we're going to deploy the officers here in detail back to their home stations or other areas of the country that are needed. But we're going to continue to enforce immigration law. That's what the American people voted for. But it has to be a priority of criminals. And look, I hear all the hate about, you should arrest everybody. Oh, we are. But we're prioritizing those who are the biggest threat to our community. The rapists, the murderers, the child molesters. That's the right thing to do. But I'll say it again. President Trump made a promise of mass deportation, and that's what this country's going to get.
This is a little bit of rewriting history right here, and I think we need to talk about this. Trump promised mass deportations of criminals. But you'll notice how the definition has changed now to Trump has promised mass deportations, because there really weren't enough criminals to deport to meet Trump's desire for mass deportations. So they've literally just been rounding up anybody and deporting them. So our deal is here in Minneapolis. Our deal in Minneapolis is we've seen Trump bail in these cities before. It seems like ICE really only has the capacity to surge up for 2 months, and then resources start to drain, or the political blowback gets too intense, or the situation just backfires and they move on. And that's the thing. This isn't over. This isn't over by any long shot. They're going to get in their city. Speculation has been New York. Cities in Pennsylvania are on alert because Philadelphia and potentially Pittsburgh could be targets for ICE. There's just, this is going to keep happening over and over and over again. And this is why it's important that ICE be shut down. And I do want to take just a sec to talk about the funding mechanism of ICE for people who think that the DHS shutdown won't matter. It does matters a lot. ICE was given $75 million additional dollars in last year's reconciliation bill that the Republicans passed. Issue is they have 4 years to use that $75 million. Okay, it's a one-time supplemental, but it's over the course of 4 years. So when you break it down, which NPR did, their average ICE yearly budget shot up to $29 billion a year. The Trump administration is counting on that $10 billion in DHS funding that's in the yearly budget that's currently being held up by Republicans refusing to reform ICE. Without that $10 billion, that means that ICE and the reports of DHS are going to have to tap into that $75 billion that Congress gave them last year to cover. So if ICE stays shut down long term, that money starts to drain out sooner than what Trump and the Republicans expected. And with Republicans expected to lose half or potentially all of Congress in November, those funds aren't going to get replenished. There's not going to be another big supplemental funding of ICE in the future. So it's important that ICE is shut. It's important that DHS shuts down tomorrow night. And it probably is going to shut down tomorrow night because, as I wrote on Politics USA, Democrats are rejecting the proposal that the Trump administration put forward, which really wasn't a proposal at all. It was another vague, trust us a bunch of we'll do some stuff kind of thing, that with no legislative text, no plan to pass a bill, no assurances of anything. So that is where things stand. The people in Minneapolis should feel good about what they've done. They should feel good about getting ICE out of their community. But when Homan says there's going to be some agents of presence left there, we need to wonder what that is. And we need to not take for granted and move on. Now, here's Victor saying, we should be listening. We should be stepping into a new year with hope that our nation will find its way back to the light, that we as a people will unite against the powers of darkness that have led so many astray. Darkness has fallen upon America with lies. I think people are understanding what's going on now. People are understanding. And I think it took, oh gosh, I hate to say this, it took the killings of 2 white Americans to really catch the nation's attention. I'm not saying that Democrats or people who care about liberties and rights, no matter their political persuasion, were not upset about what ICE is doing. We're not trying to take action about what ICE is doing. I'm suggesting that the Good and Peretti killings broke into the mainstream and turned ICE into a different kind of story than it was before those shootings happened. So that changed things. And it changed the perception of ICE. It changed the perception of what ICE is doing. And it pretty much destroyed the narrative. And I've seen, and I agree with this, that it changed the culture war. The whole culture war that Republicans were running on about trans people and everything else. Well, that got pushed aside for the fact that there's a immigration and customs enforcement agency nowhere near the border. harming innocent Americans, killing them, hurting them, injuring them. And we talk about the true murders, but you do all the people that have been injured by ICE and the Border Patrol in these operations. So we should be vigilant, we should be smart, we should be strong. But we also should not take anything for granted, and we'll be willing to realize that this is a long-term conflict that will continue. That Trump is going to continue pushing this, and the American people are going to have to continue to push back and say no. Ruth Jacobs left us a comment saying, defund ICE, no more Gestapo in the United States. Yeah, I think defund ICE is a really, really important slogan. I think Republicans want their opponents to go with abolish ICE, but I think defunding is way more important because in reality, the country needs some kind of immigration and customs enforcement somewhere, some agency along the border doing this kind of work. So when you start talking about getting rid of law enforcement, it kind of plays into that Republican narrative of lawlessness. Now, when you talk about defunding something that's gone rogue and wrong and is violating the rights and liberties of people daily, that's a better argument, in my view, and it's something more people can grasp onto and understand. So I think defund is definitely the right word there. The administration is going to have to keep dealing with this political problem because it's not going away. And the damage has been done to the reputational damage, so to speak, has been done to ICE. There's no coming back. There's no reforming. There's no reforming the image of ICE. The people in the masks with the guns on American streets that are harming and shooting people, that's the perception and the culture now. So that's what people have to realize. We have a question here. What are the chances by Bridge? What are the chances of ICE being reformed by Congress, and why are Republicans so hateful to fund the murder of U.S. citizens? The chances of ICE being reformed by Congress are really good, really strong. I think something's going to have to be done. There's no commitment by Democrats for giving any money to ICE, any money, not a penny, not a dime, until these reforms happen. And that could mean a very, very, very long shutdown. And since the rest of the government's open, there's no real reason to worry about giving DHS their money. And they do have that big pile of money. So it's not like Republicans can argue that operations have shut down. But the point of this that no one is talking about is the point of this is to make them burn through that stash of money. So why are Republicans so hateful to fund the murder of U.S. citizens? That's an important question. And I think that's the question that the culture of the country is asking. Because this whole policy is just so cruel. It just looks cruel. When immigration enforcement is effective, it happens and it's not cruel and barbaric and inhumane. And rights are honored. And there's a process that plays out. Whenever what the Trump administration is doing is violating rights, norms in the entire process and harming people, harming human beings. We have another one. Stop impeding law enforcement. Well, that would be great if law enforcement was being impeded, but what is that supposed law enforcement doing on American cities and streets? Why is it there? Why are there people violating the rights? It's not impeding law enforcement if people are exercising their constitutional rights and then being shot in the process. The whole impeding law enforcement is just some really cute jargon that's misapplied in this situation. But Republicans and media will frame denying ICE funding as denying DHS funds. That's the thing. That doesn't seem to be happening yet. I think there's just such a public contempt for Trump's ICE, for Trump's DHS and what they're doing, that the media, which by the way, I'm convinced 90% of the reason the media does polling is so they know which direction to steer their coverage. They're not talking about this as a homeland security issue, because Trump's changed the conversation. Trump took a homeland security apparatus and turned it into a domestic sort of, trying to choose the right word, a domestic federalized police force. And that is unconstitutional. MAGA doesn't care about American values and due process. That's true. MAGA has shown that they no longer care about due process. They only seem to care about due process when it impacts them. And then they want to claim their rights have been violated. Yeah, they may not care, but what we're seeing is that MAGA is greatly outnumbered here. They're the minority in this situation by a large extent, by about 65-35 or 70-30. Oh boy. Okay. The blah blah will think that they have left, and as soon as they feel comfortable to go outside again, ICE will be waiting. You know, this is a myth. This is a myth that the right really believes, that there was, because of Trump, that there was no immigration enforcement before now. There has been immigration enforcement all through this country for decades and decades. Immigration enforcement is nothing new. What's new is that immigration enforcement is targeting people who aren't breaking the law. See, if you're in the United States illegally, it's not a crime. It's a civil violation. Now, if you commit a crime and you're in the country illegally, then, you're a criminal, deported. So that is the distinction that has been obliterated, and I mean obliterated, by this administration and their mischaracterization of law enforcement and ICE. ICE is not going after violent criminals. They're going after 5-year-olds. Yes. That's very true. ICE, because Trump and Stephen Miller put a quota on them, is going after the low-hanging fruit, which is anybody and everybody. And that's the problem. They're not doing what Trump said they were going to do. People who are in the country illegally aren't criminals. They're committing a civil violation. And they could easily be sent back to their home countries and banned from re-entering for a period of time. But they shouldn't be in jails. They shouldn't be in detention centers. Let's all hope and pray that law enforcement will be safe. Well, I think all law enforcement should be safe. I think that people should show the same level, people should hope that everyone is safe, that this shouldn't be happening, that Trump has created a dangerous situation. He's created a dangerous situation for law enforcement, and that includes all levels of law enforcement. And he's created a dangerous situation for the residents in these cities and anywhere where these kind of operations happen. It's not safe. And Trump has endangered the safety of the country. They're also going after U.S. citizens for observing. That's the Renee Good murder, and how they're targeting people and threatening them and detaining them if you try to observe what ICE is doing. And it's your constitutional right to be able to observe your government, to criticize your government. And yes, as the pro-gun people like to say, if you legally are carrying a weapon. You constitutionally have the right to do that within the limits of state and local laws. So what Trump is doing is stomping all over the law. Okay, gang, we've hit the 20-minute mark here. Thank you for joining me. Thank you for joining us. I'm Jason Easley. I write for Politicus USA. I write for the Daily with Sarah Jones as well. I contribute there too. Sarah Jones runs a fantastic publication. Please subscribe to both of them on Substack. Follow us on YouTube, Politicus USA, X, Politicus USA, Instagram, Politicus USA, TikTok, Politicus USA, Facebook, Politicus USA. We're everywhere. And please follow along for more videos and interesting content. Until next time, stay together and stay strong.